Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 233, I chat with acoustician Anthony Grimani about the acoustical considerations for immersive sound systems. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded November 20th, 2014. Episode 233, Acoustics for Immersive Audio. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by SmartThings. SmartThings lets you control and monitor your home from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. To get started, visit smartthings.com/twit, and you'll save 10% off any home security or solution kit when you use the code TWIT10 at checkout. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Anthony Grimani, a master acoustician and CEO of MSR Acoustics. Hey, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hi, Scott, and I am a geek, too.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I know you are a serious geek, so you're perfect for this show, and I welcome you back. I think this is your fourth or fifth appearance on the show, and I know you're one of my most popular guests, so I'm sure glad you're back with us today.
Glad to be back, Master Exaggerator. I think it's only the third appearance, but I'd love to do, many more. Many more.
I'm sure you will. If I have anything to say about it, when I do, you certainly will.
Thank you.
Before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody knows that if you're watching live at live.twit.tv or logged into the chat room there or at irc.twit.tv, you can post questions for Anthony as we go, and I will pass along as many as I can. So today I wanted to talk about immersive sound. We've heard a lot about it. We've talked a lot about it on this show. Atmos, Dolby Atmos, and Oro 3D are kind of the front runners of what we call immersive sound, which is basically a three-dimensional sound field. Rather than having speakers just more or less at ear level, we've got now speakers above us as well to create a three-dimensional sound field. And I wanted to talk to you, Anthony, about how you approach designing rooms, because that's really what your company does, is you design the acoustic treatments anyway, and the other parts of the room as well for home theaters. So I wanted to talk with you today about how this whole move towards immersive sound affects what you do. Give us sort of a big picture, drawn back, zoomed out, if you will, overview of sort of the things you're starting to have to think about now that immersive audio is essentially upon us.
How big of a picture do you want? 120 inches? 180 inches?
Oh, 21 by 9, of course. 235 to 1.
Was it 237 or was it 239?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Yeah.
There's another topic of conversation right there.
Let's debate that for 2 or 3 hours. And no.
Let's not say we did, shall we?
Deal. So let me just say that first, the move towards immersive sound, 3D sound, whatever you want to call it, is really exciting for us. I've always been a fan of improving the spatial resolution of the playback environment to match what was originally thought of in the production environment, and that's a move definitely in the right direction. The rooms we've completed recently with Atmos have yielded results to the client that were fantastic. They were like, "Oh my God, this is so amazing! I never want to leave home anymore. This is great." So with our intention of locking people in their homes and like being stuck in front of the very big screen, the 2-3 whatever it is 2-1 screen, we're succeeding, and so we're really excited. The addition of the ceiling speakers, the upper wall speakers, the extra speakers does introduce some challenges in terms of layout, in terms of integration with lighting, architectural elements, and of course, relative to the acoustical character of the room. So one question that's actually been up a lot is, well, what should the dispersion character of a speaker be for those added channels, the extra ceiling channels, the extra wide channels? What should that be? Which way should they point? And what should the acoustical character of the room be for a 11 channel, a 18 channel, a 24 channel room compared to what we've been doing all along in the 5 and 7.1 channel world? And you know, in the category of this just in, I was actually at Dolby Labs this morning talking to some of the folks over there. If any of them are listening, hello. Warren Mansfield spent a lot of time with me this morning. Thank you very much. And we talked about this. We said, you know, it all comes back to what did the director intend? What did the sound designer intend? What environment were they in when they were experiencing the final mix of the movie? And what does it take to replicate that in your personal home theater, your home cinema, your private screening room, your monument to audio video in your house? So I've got some interesting data, and I'd love to show you some of the things that have come out of that. Talk
Please.
A little bit about some of the conversations, and also I'd love to share some of our experience in the design of home cinemas for Atmos now that the rooms are done, and you know what we've noticed from the engineering, the thinking, the building, and then the final listening.
That sounds great to me.
Also, just to clarify, my firm has a few different activities, but one of the things we do is we get hired as, you call it, theater consultants, which is an engineering group that will design the sound, the picture, the layout, the interiors, the seating, all of the more technical parts of high-quality home cinema to make sure that it all works out well. So that's what we do when we're not sitting around doing podcasts.
All right, very good. But it sounds to me like you're more concerned with performance than you are with decor. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes and no, actually. Ultimately, our goal is to achieve a certain type of performance, and that type of performance is actually not that subjective. It's objective in that what it's wanting to do is to replicate the sound designer's intent. And I'm lucky enough to know a lot of sound designers. I could, you know, pick up the phone and call folks who have won many Academy Awards for Best Movie and say, hey, you know, what were you trying to do with this movie? I'm hearing this sound here and this thing there. Is that what you wanted to do or not? And we can have a frank discussion about what their intention was. So, performance-wise, we're trying to replicate the sound designer or the director's intent, but we're trying to do that in an environment that doesn't look like an audio lab. I'm often in arguments with people that go, I don't care what it looks like, just make it sound good and look good. It's like, well, it also has to be a comfortable environment to be in. When you walk in, I don't want the audience to have this cold, uninviting feeling. The room needs to feel good to be in, because in your unconscious, that registers as a place where you have sound comfort. You can sit in there and go, hey, I like this. I'm ready for my movie. So we do worry about acoustics. We worry about optics. We worry about equipment reliability, functionality, and we do worry about aesthetic design and make sure that the room looks good.
Mm-hmm. That must mean that you often work with interior designers. And I've heard other installers talk about working with interior designers and how they often don't understand the needs of the performance side of things. Do you find that to be true, or have you worked, most of the theater designers you've worked with, interior designers, I mean, are amenable to you saying, well, we need to do it this way because of the sound, or we need to do it that way because of the picture?
I actually I love working with interior designers, and I say that because they're a class of folks that's either inherently or trained to be able to visualize what a finished result is going to be, and in complete abstraction, pick colors, pick shapes, pick forms, and draw it on a piece of paper and go, here's what it is. And once it gets built, it looks gorgeous. And I'm often stunned by starting from what's called a color boards, which is this little piece of foam core with a bunch of color samples and carpet samples and pieces of wood on them, and looking at that and going, I don't know, I have no idea what that's going to look like. I see all these different things, and then it gets all built up, and I'm like, wow, that looks amazing. How did you know that was going to look so good? And they're like, that's what I do.
That's their job. Yeah.
That's their job. I have a lot of respect for what they do. I'm very excited about what they do, and in our work we collaborate. We just go, well, you have your aesthetic vision, and we have our optical and acoustical vision. Let's work together and make this thing a fantastic result. And just through cooperation, communication, and collaboration, we end up with that famous equation of 1 + 1 being equal to 3, which otherwise you end up with these ugly rooms or rooms that sound and look terrible, and that's not the point.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, I've talked to a number of sound designers, getting back to the point you made about you want to reproduce what the sound designer, what the director, what the movie maker intended. Very often, at least when they mix the movie for a theatrical release, they're in a big, gigantic theater that replicates a normal commercial cinema. And I think in some cases, at least, I'm going to get somebody on to talk about this more extensively. When they remix for the home release, they are in a smaller environment with speakers much nearer to them, which we call the near field. Do you, in your experience, and you're talking with these sound designers and so on, is that a common practice, or do they not then take speakers and little home speakers, basically little compared to the theater speakers, and bring them in close so that they can hear more like what it's going to sound like in a home?
My opinion of, I could be shot for saying this, but my opinion of the remixing for home is it's a terrible idea. It is not necessary. And a lot of the seminal work done by Tom Holman in the early days of THX proved that actually, given certain things you do in the home environment, you can actually replicate in a living room or a dedicated theater the exact sound field, the exact levels, the exact spectrum, the exact sound position that the director and sound designer heard in the big mix stage if you do certain basic things in how you lay out and tune your system. So a film mix as prepared for release in the movie theater can play back in a much smaller home theater out of typical home speakers, correctly positioned and correctly tuned, without loss of intent. And what I have heard, on the other hand, is that the remixes change the sound so radically from what the director intended that they bear no resemblance to what the director had approved. And in fact, they go in the wrong direction. And that's partially because sometimes the rooms that are used to remix the small room mixes in are improperly set up with the wrong speakers in the wrong positions and make certain assumptions about how you're supposed to do it, and they're often wrong, so you're actually mixing to the wrong environment. So as far as I'm concerned, take the film mix, put it on the disc, put it up however you're hearing it, whether it's streamed or on an actual media, and that's all you need to do. And I know that's kind of may come as a surprise to people, but I've done it over and over and over and over again to take an actual film master mix and playing it in a room that's about 300 square feet, typical 20 by 15 square foot room, 20 feet by 15 feet, and set up the system according to basic rules and parameters, and ended up with a mix where the person who actually mixed the movie said, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Wow. Okay. Well, it is a bit of possibly a controversial stand, but certainly seems well supported, and certainly would mean a lot less work for the studios, and they can't object to that.
Right. So, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Your turn.
Okay, my turn. Well, I was going to start. You mentioned, where the speakers should be and so on and so forth. Let's start with that. We know it's fairly clear where to place the speakers in a 5.1 or a 7.1 system. The back speakers in a 7.1 system are not clearly exactly defined, but the speakers in a 5.1 kind of are. What about now that we add the third dimension? Where are the best places to put those speakers?
Great. So I have a little graphic show over here on this here computer. And I'm going to go back to the in the beginning.
In the beginning.
So actually, this is not the beginning. This is actually what happens in cinemas and therefore also in mix rooms where the program material is made. for Atmos. I think it's really important to realize what work Dolby has been doing in the last number of years in the movie theaters, and what the director, what the sound designer, what the sound mixer were hearing when the film was being made. And based on understanding that, you can then understand how you go about translating this into the smaller room. So in the beginning, this is a great diagram, by the way. A lot of the diagrams I'm showing here come from papers by Dolby Labs, so trademark acknowledgments, copyright acknowledgments, all go to them.
Roger.
So what's shown here is in red are the regular surround speakers you would see in a regular movie theater for either 5.1 or 7.1 presentation. And what's shown over here in gray would be the regular front loudspeakers you would see in a room originally set for 5.1. So to switch up to Atmos, what gets added is shown in blue for the surround speakers here. I don't know if you guys can read that. So what's added first, and interestingly enough, not really discussed very much, is the speakers that are in the what's called the wide position in the room. So let's say, the main seat in the room was this. This is like the director's chair over here.
The money seat.
The money seat, the captain's seat. So
yes.
One thing that the captain gets in addition to a regular 7-channel presentation, and to be clear, I'll enumerate those. This would be 1 channel left, 2 channels center, 3 channels right. Side right would be the 4th channel. Back right would be this part of the array over here. Back left would be that part of the array. And side left would be this part of the array. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 channels. That's sort of the state of the art today before Atmos.
Right. And we should point out that all of the surround speaker arrays, channels 4, 5, 6, and 7, the same signal comes out of all of those speakers.
Right.
All of the speakers on the right side, all the speakers on the left side,
Correct.
half the speakers on the back, and the other half of the speakers on the back. They all carry the same signal.
Correct. This array is 1 channel of sound. It's just distributed across all of those speakers. This half array is another channel sound. That half array is another channel sound. That's another channel sound, right?
Right.
Thanks for pointing that out. So the palette gets increased in terms of number of colors if you want. And the director is given an extra channel potentially over here played out of these loudspeakers that are in the wide position. Their main purpose is to allow a transition of sounds from the screen into the surround field in which that transition is filled. Before, there was a black hole here. So if a sound designer said, I want a sound to start in the middle of the screen, go off to the left because the car's moving to the left, and then it's disappearing in behind us, there was a gap right here. And you could never really have a very seamless transition between here and there. With the addition of these wide channels in Atmos, things transition better from front to side to back. Mm-hmm. There's a complementary channel on the other side, of course, here. I'm calling it a channel. It's actually multiple loudspeakers that are playing sounds that are assigned to them. I'll talk about that later. Right. The other loudspeakers that get added typically in a mixed room or a theater is these ceiling speakers. And you see an array over here of these loudspeakers over here to the right side of the screen and to the left side of the screen. Each one of these gets its own sound and has as a purpose the ability to take a sound from the screen to go up and over your head evenly and go to the back channel. So let's say you have an airplane going up and over your head. You instead of it starting in the screen and then kind of going nebulous before it ends up in the back, in this case, it actually transitions through all these speakers seamlessly, giving you a sense that it really is going through the room. Same thing would happen with a spaceship, but of course in space, you're not supposed to get any sound, so I don't know how we figure that out.
Damn straight. I always complain about that. And we should also point out here that if you're transitioning to an Atmos system, as you pointed out, those overhead speakers, each one can get its own signal independent of all the others. Yeah. The same is true of all those surround speakers, which used to be in an array and all got the same signal. Now with Atmos, they can all get independent signals.
Correct. That's a big transition in the signal processing, which allows every single one of these to get the sound that really needs to be there. And that gives the sound designer the ability to precisely place a sound anywhere in the room, rather than this nebulous array over here where it's kind of off to your side. The sound designer can either make it a wide sound stage or very precisely located anywhere. And that's very, very cool. Optionally, I do want to point out these green loudspeakers over here that are particularly useful for larger screening rooms, larger theaters, where there's a half right and a half left speaker, sometimes known as a left center. There's a bunch of different names. I like to call it the half left and half right, which its purpose is to, again, increase the spatial resolution of sounds across the screen, so that when a sound is moving from center to right, you're not just relying on a phantom image between these two, but there's an actual loudspeaker there that's complementing that. That phantom image may resolve just fine when you sit over here. But if you sit over here, that phantom image will sound completely different, sometimes completely breaking. There are certain phasing effects that come from the differences of distance that mean that you could get a complete misrepresentation of the phantom when you're there, and adding that loudspeaker here in a big room is very, very beneficial. Okay?
Got it.
That's the layout of a Dolby Atmos movie theater. Larger theaters end up with more speakers. Smaller theaters have less speakers. But the whole idea is to create this canopy of loudspeakers all the way around you, so you have better spatial resolution, better ability to hear all the different sounds in the different locations.
Before we continue, let me just point out something that M. Heiss in the chat room, our friend Michael Heiss, has pointed out, which is that for Atmos, it isn't as much of a remaster than a remix. You have to set things differently because of the smaller number of speakers. In that diagram we just saw, it's for a very large commercial cinema, and there are tons of speakers. In the home, of course, there are many fewer. And so wouldn't that require the mixer, the sound engineer, to have to kind of juggle things to some degree?
So first of all, hi, Mike. How are you? Good to see you. How's the pink noise doing?
Indeed.
So that's actually a very good question. The idea of Atmos and the intelligence of Atmos is it's supposed to know how many speakers you have and where you're playing them. It's supposed to know what the director intended for you to hear, and it's supposed to remap all of that so that it plays back right. You don't have to reinterpret it. If you're going to reinterpret it, are you reinterpreting it for 2 ceiling speakers, 4 ceiling speakers, 8 ceiling speakers? Well, guess what? Home Atmos has the ability to do up to 10 ceiling speakers and 24 channels of sound around you, at the plane of the fronts and the sides and the backs. So what are you remixing for? I don't think you should remix. I think you should leave it like the director intended and let the Atmos processor take care of remapping that based on the channels you've told the processor you have.
That is one of the key components of Dolby Atmos, of course, is the fact that it's scalable and that it adapts to whatever you have in your system, as long as you report to the processor what it is you have in your system.
Correct.
But if you do that, then it should simply work. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay. So you were about to show us another diagram here.
So I have this relatively dark diagram that is also from Dolby, and this is just supposed to represent speakers being lit up in an auditorium, showing that, hey, at any given point, you may be sitting over here, and different loudspeakers may create a sound field that fills in a sense of being immersed in sound coming from behind, from in front, from the left, from the right, from here, from there, whatever it is that ultimately the sound designer wanted you to do. So let's take a look at what happens when you bring this home. And I'm going to look at what today is sort of the most commonly the highest hierarchy of presentation available today. Actually, there are higher hierarchies, but most of the processors you can get today will top out at this, which is 9.1.2. And what that means is that there are 9 loudspeakers in the circle around you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there's 2 ceiling speakers. And that is one form of kind of remapping or re-representation of what was intended to be seen and heard in these environments, right? So
yeah, except for the fact, I understand what you're saying here about 9.1.2, which is one way of designating the Dolby Atmos configuration that you have. It means 9 channels around and 2 channels overhead.
Right.
I myself, if I had 11 channels of amplification, which is really the limiting factor here, wouldn't you? I would think I would rather have 7 surround channels and 4 speakers overhead. Wouldn't that give you a greater sense of a 3-dimensional bubble?
So that's a good question. This particular layout, by the way, is my favorite right now in replicating what sound designers and mixers are trying to do in creating a believable bubble of sound. Let me explain that. First of all, personally, I have to be clear, this is a diagram from Dolby. I actually think of this very slightly differently in terms of ideal positions. When we design rooms, and I'll show you some diagrams in a minute, for one, the back channels are a little narrower to each other. I'd like them to be closer to about see here where it says between 135 and 150. I actually like them to start at about 160 to 170 so that the back speakers would end up here and here. And there's a lot of reasons for that in terms of the contrast between the side and the back and the effect of how you hear it from the back. That's one little thing. Second little thing that's important here is that I feel like the benefit of these wide speakers, wide front speakers sometimes they're called, in complementing the sound field that goes from the front stage to the sides to the back, filled in with an actual hard speaker instead of a phantom, I think that's extremely beneficial. And I think that in the improvement, in advancing the state of the art and believability of a storytelling through sound, this is going to sound kind of weird. This, I think, brings more to the party than the ceiling speaker. And that's because if you actually listen to most 5.1 or 7.1 systems and you pay attention to the sound field, you will notice that you have a frontal sound field, you have a side or back sound field, and there's this black hole between the two. And we've all been used to that. We've all just gotten used to, for the last 20 years, that just not having anything from that part. And then when you hear a pair of speakers over there filling in that part that takes the sound field past the screen and wraps it around you in a panoramic way, when you shut those off, you're like, oh, whoa, that's not right. So
where'd my wides go? Yeah.
Where did my soundstage go? Now, if you think about, as a human being going around and, in real life, there's things you see in front of you, and there's sort of the frontal 20, 30 degrees. And your field of vision, if I want everybody to get up and move their hands like this now, and go as far as you can to where you stop seeing your hands. Those of you who actually lose them at 10 degrees, it's time to go see your optometrist. Because something's not right. Actually,
yes.
Something could be very not right. Those of you who can actually extend out to where you're seeing an angle of about 120 or 130 degrees will see what I'm talking about with these wide speakers, which is, in real life, you see things over this wide angle and you hear things placed around there very precisely. Adding a pair of speakers there at about plus and minus 50 to 60 degrees does more to improve the believability of the movie, of the storytelling part of the audio track, than just about anything else you can think of, here, up there, and all the stuff around that really can be pretty distracting.
Okay.
So
that's an interesting argument I'd never heard before, so thank you for that. I
love to argue.
Yes, and you do it so well.
Thank you. Thank you. So we tend to like a little bit shallower of an angle than 70 degrees. So here in the Dolby diagram, it shows between 50 and 70. We tend to like to go a little bit closer to the 50-degree position than the 70, whatever. I'm just a really big supporter of what this loudspeaker does to improve the believability of the audio track.
The immersion, if you will, which is the whole point.
The immersion. Now, next thing, of course, is the thing that everybody thinks about in Atmos, which is the ceiling speaker, or the speaker that creates sound over your head. Here, it's shown very wide, and I'm a little more of a fan of putting it kind of a little closer to you and matching a little bit more this. So if you look at, directors over here and is hearing some ceiling effects and you go, well, what angle is that? It's not all the way over to your side. It tends to be more kind of at an angle of 25 or so degrees. So I tend to prefer this loudspeaker here positioned a little bit more this place.
A little bit more in front of the seating position and a little closer in.
Correct. A little closer and a little further in front. Now, by putting it over here, you do one really essential thing, which is to fill in the sound field between the screen and the sides and backs. When you take not a spaceship in space, but an airplane, and you make it go overhead, there is a black hole right here. There's tons and tons of demos I could pull out if we were actually in a good listening room, and I can show you, look at that plane, it goes overhead, but there is a gap point when it's right here in the sound field, and putting a speaker there to take up that gap is wonderful. It's amazing what it does to make the thing more palpable and more real. So,
got it.
This currently, I would kind of call this the highest hierarchy of what's available on the market from manufacturers that have introduced products. There is a product from Trinov that has more channels of output where you can place more speakers around you and more ceiling speakers and more of that, and that's all great. And my advice would be, hey, as you multiply the number of speakers around, try to get closer and closer to this layout. Keep in mind that this is what the sound director and the sound designer, the mixer, everybody involved in the soundtrack of this movie were listening to. Now, this is a perspective view of that same diagram in which we see our screen over here, left, center, and right speakers. Here we have our wide loudspeakers. Here we have our side loudspeakers. Here's the back loudspeakers. And here's our ceiling speakers.
Two of them. So it's a 9.1.2 system.
9.1.2. This is basically just a perspective view of this.
Of that, got it.
Also, a diagram care of Dolby Laboratories. All copyrights belong to their respective owner. And again, what I want to point out over here is I would prefer to see these back speakers a little bit closer together. I'd prefer to see these sides and backs a little bit higher in the room, by the way. But the placement of this wide speaker, we tend to put at basically a straight line between the right speaker and the side speaker. So as the position of this starts typically at seated ear height, and this typically would go up to maybe 1.5 feet or 2 feet over seated ear height, I recommend placing that at whatever is in a line drawn between here and there.
Right.
We already talked about this. I'd prefer to see this a little bit closer in, a little bit further forward, but there it is. Now, what I really would love to see, is a much bigger and much better center speaker than this. This is the point at which I want to remind everybody that most of the storytelling comes from here, and that what appears to be a relatively small and low sound pressure level loudspeaker is something that should first be chucked and replaced by something much better before we engage in making too much noise around the audience that doesn't really contribute very much to the core storytelling. This has got to be more better.
And rightly so. I forget who it was, a guest a few weeks ago said that, it might have been Brian Vessa or Brian McCarty, one of the two SMPTE guys. Something like over 80% of all the sound in a soundtrack comes out of that center speaker.
Yep, that's correct. And so we did some tests years ago at THX and measured the average sound pressure level and spectrum across all the different speakers in a mix, in a 5.1 and 7.1 mix. And the majority, you can diagram it like this, where this is center and that's left and right, and then these are sides and those are backs. I mean, it's a very steep triangle. Most of the energy comes from there, and that is where you want to have the best quality speaker. And I just want to point out that I don't care how good the left and right speakers are. If the center speaker is a small, lower quality, lower end speaker with poor directivity that doesn't cover the audience area correctly, you won't end up with very good sound. I don't care how many more speakers you add in there. So,
M5 in the chat room is asking a question about this point. You mentioned the center channel being bigger, and he asks, bigger or more speakers? What has size got to do with it?
Size is everything. So what I'm saying is over here, and admittedly, this is just a conceptual diagram, okay?
Right.
But I found a soapbox, and I'm standing on it. Stay with me.
Gotcha.
This, to me, in this diagram, looks like a relatively small center speaker with maybe a pair of 4-inch woofers and a little tweeter in the middle. And that maybe costs all of $95.
Right.
And that is a really nasty thing to do to a soundtrack, because you really want a loudspeaker with maybe a pair of 5 1/4 or 6 1/2-inch woofers if you want to lay them down horizontally, and you want a design that doesn't actually cause a restriction of dispersion. So I haven't mentioned that yet, but these little speakers have two problems. One, they don't play very loud, they don't play bass very well, so they're going to get overloaded. But also the way they spray sound into the room is relatively restricted. Because the two 4-inch woofers are straddling a tweeter, there's an interference effect. That means that straight on axis they sound great, and as you move one seat to the left or one seat to the right, they change significantly, and how they change is you lose mid-frequency energy. So right around 2 to 3 kilohertz, you actually have a hole in sound. 2 to 3 kilohertz is the core of where intelligibility and sound in a voice communication is, and that's the wrong place to be losing energy. So I just happened to notice this in this diagram. You know, I want to point it out because this is the most important channel, and before spending a whole bunch of money on more speakers and more amps, let's make sure we have a really good sound quality over here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good, very good. Well, there's plenty more to talk about, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But for this moment, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, a new sponsor for Home Theater Geeks I'm happy to welcome to the show, which is SmartThings. SmartThings lets you control and monitor your home from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's basically home automation and home security, which you control from your mobile device, your smartphone typically. Now, here are some of the really cool things you can do with SmartThings. You can get notifications if someone you don't know tries to enter your home. You can get instant alerts to prevent a small leak from causing a major flood. Very important in certain parts of the country, no doubt. You can control and automate your lights and small appliances from wherever you are. You know, I think this is great to be able to, you know, drive up to your home and set up your lights before you enter the building. You can stay connected with your family by getting notifications when people come and go. And, of course, you can protect valuable items and secure areas that are off limits. With the SmartThings app, you can easily see what's happening in every room and with all of your connected devices. It's like having your home in the palm of your hand. The SmartThings app is free, and it's available for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. And the really great thing about SmartThings is that the possibilities are literally endless. SmartThings' family of smart sensors and outlets work with hundreds of popular connected devices, including offerings from Logitech, Dropcam, Nest, Sonos, and the Philips Hue light bulb. Very cool. It's also compatible with the major wireless formats such as Zigbee, Z-Wave, and Wi-Fi. So it's very easy to set up an entire system in your home with what you're already doing. And if you're a developer, you can create new ways to use SmartThings and then publish them for everyone to use. To get started creating your smart home, visit smartthings.com/twit, and you'll get 10% off any home security or solution kit by entering the code TWIT10 at checkout. For fans of Twit, solution kits start at just $170, and home security kits start at $350. Each kit includes a SmartThings hub with everything you'll need to turn your home into a smart home in as little as 15 minutes. And you'll also get free shipping within the United States. That's smartthings.com/twit. And remember to enter the code TWIT10 at checkout. And we thank SmartThings very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks. Okay, we were talking about speakers in an Atmos system and the importance of the center channel speaker, and I will absolutely agree with you 100% on that. Caffeine-Free Dave asks a question that you might have actually dealt with in some of your installations. What is the spousal acceptance factor when you say that you're hanging a speaker or more from your ceiling or cutting a hole in your ceiling?
That's a good question. Actually, that's not controversial at all. Think of the number of homes in which there's background music playing out of ceiling speakers everywhere, and I actually think of the number of times I've worked on home cinemas where all of the speakers were on the ceiling, the center, the left, the right, the sides, the back, everything was up there, for the purpose of spousal acceptance factor, or what I call low divorce factor. So
another way to put it. Okay, I agree.
I'm essentially not worried about that because in most cases it's very acceptable. We've even done some designs that are going through construction now in which we're using these hidden speakers. These are things that are flush to the sheetrock and that, given some equalization and tuning, blast through a very thin layer of plaster and produce a reasonable sound. I'll show you a diagram in a few minutes here. And then you can't see anything. It's completely flush.
So that's a high spousal acceptance factor and a very low
divorce factor.
Divorce threat factor. A couple people in the chat room are asking about the size of all of these speakers. And I think that's a good segue into this question, because you were talking earlier about how the center speaker needs to be typically larger than it often is. I would say ideally you'd want the three front speakers to be identical speakers. Difficult to do if the front, right, and left are towers, because then you have to put the center speaker behind an acoustically transparent screen or have it block your view. But what about the other speakers, the ceiling speakers, the wide speakers? How large do they need to be, and what sort of frequency response do they need to have? One question in the chat room is, do these speakers all need to be full range?
Yes, you absolutely have to have an array of 24 loudspeakers, all of which have 12-inch woofers behind them, and all are the size of a dorm refrigerator. No. So that's actually a very interesting question. And Scott, you pointed out right in the beginning when we were talking about the surround speaker array that in the olden days of 5.1 and 7.1, because those are old days already, right? That's like antiquity at this point.
Indeed, yes.
In those days, the surround speakers could actually be made pretty small. In the movie theater, they were pretty small. They usually played relatively low sound pressures compared to the front. Although, at any point in time, if a sound designer wanted to put something really loud inside, for me, side right, they could. And the loudspeakers in a movie theater or a dubbing stage have the ability to play almost as loud as the front channels. So you get into the reality that it's possible for a sound designer to take the loud sound of an airplane, of a big transporter plane, have it go from the screen up and over you all the way to the back in full sound pressure level. And at that point, every speaker along the way would need to be able to play the same sound pressure level. And that's egregious. That's horrible. And I call it horrible just because it means you got to have big speakers everywhere. Well, guess what? They're not doing that in the movie theaters. Okay, the speakers that are behind the screen in a movie theater are these very large horn-loaded devices that can play plenty loud. And what's mounted along the ceiling and back and the sides are all smaller loudspeakers. And the expectation is typically that even though somebody has a knob, they could want to push a lot of sound pressure level there. In most cases, that sound pressure level is going to be reduced to stay in context, or the fact that you're watching something on a screen. There also is a way during setup and tuning to essentially adjust the bandwidth of all of the feeds to those speakers, so that even if it's a relatively small speaker, you're not asking it to play very loud 50 hertz or 60 hertz, but actually restrict its crossover to the subwoofer at a higher frequency, which then gives you the ability for a smaller speaker to play plenty loud to have a convincing envelopment. So that's a long way to say that the speakers for the ceiling and the extra sides and the backs can all be quite a bit smaller than what you're putting in the front and be just fine, thank you.
Thank you. What about dispersion characteristics? A lot of people talk about the ceiling speakers and the dispersion characteristics there, that they need to have a fairly wide dispersion in order to cover the entire seating area, listening area. Do you agree with that? And how does that apply also to these extra, like the wide speakers, for example?
So what's really interesting about the business of dispersion is I'm finally seeing people talk about dispersion related to the least the least important loudspeaker in the whole thing, which is that thing up there that's only gets used for 1 or 2 seconds out of every movie. But hey, finally we're talking about dispersion. So let's take a step back. Has anybody worried about the dispersion of their front speakers? Has anybody actually?
Some of us have, yeah.
Well, thank you. Has anybody actually, when they go buy a speaker from their store, their favorite online source, wherever it is, said, hey, what's the dispersion characteristic of the speaker? Does it have a wide dispersion? What's the directivity factor? And you should have. I mentioned that the center speaker, the typical center speaker with the 2 little woofers and the tweeter in the middle, actually has a relatively restricted dispersion. I know it's a little bit counterintuitive that 2 things laid out horizontally with a tweeter in the middle, they seem like it would spread more, but no, it actually creates an interference that focuses the sound. You should worry about dispersion in all of your loudspeakers to make sure that they cover enough of the seating area and spray sound into the room the right place. So once you've worried about the dispersion of your center and of your left and rights to make sure they're covering everybody evenly, let's talk about the ceiling speaker. Ideally, yes, wherever you're putting the ceiling speaker, it's presenting sound to you that's putting you in the sound beam of the speaker. Most regular ceiling speakers, that have a woofer and a tweeter and them pointing down, if you put them in front of you, they're going to be lighting up a spot in the floor in front of you, and you're going to be 20 or 30 degrees off axis from them, and you won't be hearing the right sound. You'll hear something, but not the right sound. So, thank goodness there are several manufacturers in the world of flush-mounted ceiling speakers that make something a little more expensive in which you can actually tilt the mechanisms inside. So, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention brands, but there's 5 or 6.
Absolutely, no problem.
I can. Okay.
Yes.
So now there's like 6 or 7 brands. Look at them. But it's certainly the folks from Sonance and the folks from Speakercraft and many different companies have made things that cost a little more money, but in which you can actually pivot the speaker towards you. So first of all, for Atmos application, where you're going to put those speakers, make sure that they can send sound to you. And it has nothing to do with Atmos. It just has to do with hearing sound. You don't want the sound to be lighting up the dog that always likes to sit at your feet, because he or she doesn't really care. You want it to be lighting you up.
Right.
Same goes for the wide speakers that I like so much, those ones that are outside the screen at about 50 or 60 degrees. You got to make sure that they're sending sound towards you and not across the room. So if you use a flush-mounted speaker that hides away and has a low divorce factor, you got to make sure that it's one of those that inside you can actually tilt the mechanism so that it's feeding sound towards you. And really, that's one factor, is the sound has to come towards you. The other factor is how much of the reverberant field of the room should the speaker light up so that it sounds like it's filling in the room correctly and complementing all of the other speakers around to give you that ultimately the dome of sound that we're looking for. That's where things get more complicated. And when things are complicated, I like to look at extremes to understand where's the right thing in the middle. So
it's a great philosophy. I agree completely.
I'm an extremist.
But only to test the boundaries of really where you want to go, which is in the middle.
Centrist. I'm an extremist centrist.
There you go.
So
I like it.
Let's look at an extreme. Let's pretend I'm going to put a speaker in the wide or in the ceiling that's a horn-loaded, very narrow dispersion speaker that sends a little beam of sound right at me and nowhere else, which is a way to do it. When the sound's supposed to be over there, I'll hear it. Problem with those kinds of speakers is that they tend to create a sound character that's very pointable to, where you go, I hear the speaker, as opposed to a little bit of a enjoyable smear of sound source around the speaker. It's like this thing that comes and hits you right in the head. You go, here is the speaker. And that, in the context of a movie soundtrack, is sort of distracting, because you're sitting there watching a visual element go across the screen, then it goes over this way, and you want it to smoothly transition. You don't want to hear it going pop, 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 pop into each speaker, which is what you would get if it was a very narrow dispersion. Very beamy. A beamy speaker would be something that has a big horn in it, maybe a 2 or 3-way speaker with a very shallow horn. That may be a problem. So that's one direction. Now we go the other direction, which would be a very wide dispersion speaker. So something that may have drivers in all directions such as the old Bose 901s from years ago, or a multipolar speaker that's
various omnidirectional speakers, which somebody in the chat room asked about earlier.
Right. So you use an omnidirectional speaker that's radiating hemispherically through the whole room. Well, you'll get some sound. That's great. So you get some sound from there, but it may light up enough of the energy around that it may get too nebulous. And in nebulous, I mean that the sense that the sound is coming from over there may get lost compared to the right channel that should be there, or the side channel. It'll just be a little too smeary. So you ultimately want a balance between the very smeared sound field and the very beamy sound field somewhere in the middle. And interestingly enough, that midpoint may just be what we've all been used to listening to, which is kind of broadish dispersion, direct radiating speakers, or maybe what a lot of manufacturers put out these days, which is these bipolar speakers that spread a little bit more, where they put drivers on angled cabinets so it spreads a little bit more. But that's kind of the idea. Now, everything I just said depends a lot on the size of the room and how far away these things are. So if you're in a smallish room, maybe the room's 20 feet by 15 feet, and you were to put a clipped corner horn, these things with like very narrow beam horn in that wide speaker, in the ceiling speaker, if you could actually have a spouse that lets you hang a refrigerator cabinet over your head. And you should keep that spouse, by the way, if that's what's going on. What would happen with that is every time there's a sound effect at any one of those speakers, you'd be looking at that speaker or looking at that speaker. It would just be distracting in a small room. In a larger room, or a larger room that has very live surfaces, so marble floor, glass window over here, wood paneling over here, your basic house, right? We all have marble floors.
Well, we all have fairly reflective surfaces sometimes. I mean, glass doors, windows, if nothing else.
Very reflective. So in a room with a lot of reflective surfaces, maybe then you do want a speaker that sprays less energy into the room and is spraying more energy towards you, so that you have less smearing of that sound field. So that's a long ways to say it's a little complicated. You really have to consider many factors. But overall, you need the right balance between, hey, I hear it's from over there, but it's not like this little arrow of sound that's poking me right in the forehead and distracting my attention away from what I'm supposed to be paying attention to, which is right in front, right here, right there.
Well, you mentioned here different room acoustics, and whether you have marble floors or carpet, whether you have glass doors or windows, and so on. What else can you say about the acoustical character of the room, and what works best for these immersive sound formats? So
right now, what we're mainly experimenting with is kind of staying the course, which is to build rooms with a reflection decay time, which is a way to say how long does the sound bounce around the room until it finally dies out, which is another way to say how many reflective versus absorptive surfaces there are in the room. But we're typically building rooms for Atmos application in which the decay time is about 0.3 seconds. And the way you get there is you cover the wall surfaces and the floor with typically no more than 20 or 25% of absorptive materials. So a little bit of sound damping, sometimes that's what people call it, or sound absorption. A little bit of sound diffusion, so surfaces around the walls that scatter a little bit of the reflection, and some amount of reflections remaining in the room is what seems to have worked just fine in the rooms for Atmos. And what's interesting about that is that goes back to research done 20 years ago on listener preferences to the reproduction of music and voice in rooms. It seems to not have changed as you've added more channels. I do think that there is a possibility that if a room is has a lot more reflections, is more live than that, as you start to multiply the number of channels around, there is a possibility of confusion to the brain, which is, I don't know where it's all coming from anymore. And you could get to a point where even though you've added a lot more loudspeakers in Atmos, it really doesn't sound any more precise than if you just stuck with 5-channel or 7-channel sound.
Is that because you have too much reflection in the room?
Yeah, if you have too many reflections, as you can add more speakers, and they all smear together in the sound field that has really no contrast. And I've certainly heard that before in rooms that are too live, where the difference between 5-channel and 7-channel presentation is nil. There's like, you can't tell the difference. You light up each speaker individually, you can hear they're there, but in the middle of a movie, you flip between one and the other, it's like, man, there is no difference here because the room's just smearing it all around. So you do want the right balance between direct and reflected energy in the room, and that's achieved by the right directivity of speaker, it's the right size of room, the right directivity of speaker, and how much absorption you're putting around the surfaces.
Caffeine-free Dave in the chat room is asking, what is the definition of small versus large room? Is there a standard definition that you can apply those terms to? Yeah,
that's interesting. So in the world of acoustics, I'm going to answer that two ways. In the world strictly of acoustics, small room acoustics sort of extends up into rooms that are 30 or 40 feet in length. So 40 foot's a large room.
That's a big room.
But in the field of the study of the wave propagation and stuff, it's up to about 40 or so feet. Mid-size rooms are 60 feet to about maybe 100 feet. And then large room acoustics is 100 to 150 and larger. And so small is, home listening rooms and studios. Medium is kind of small lecture halls and movie theaters. And large is concert halls, cathedrals, and things like that. So that's one set of statements. In what we're talking about here amongst us home theater geeks, I'm going to call a small room something that's up to about 300 square feet. So about a 20 by 15 room. Let's agree to call a medium room something that's up to 25 or 26 square feet, and a large room something that's in the 30 to 35 feet. I'm sorry, I think I've lost myself. So 20, 26, 32 would be kind of room lengths, and then widths that kind of follow with that to agree what I'm calling small, medium, and large.
Within a home theater
for
context.
Home theater applications, home cinemas.
Got it.
So I wanted to show a few more slides relative to some of the stuff with the sound reflections. If we can go back to the screen real quick. And we're starting again with the 9.1.2 Dolby Atmos with ceiling speakers. But I do want to point out that Dolby has developed a way to do this that does not require ceiling speakers. And that a lot of that is the work done within the team, driven by Warren Mansfield. Hi, Warren, if you're there. Warren spent many years working at THX before joining Dolby. He knows a lot about speakers, and came up with the idea that, hey, there's a way to make a loudspeaker so that it can beam sound up at a reflection point over here and give you the illusion of having ceiling speakers without needing ceiling speakers. So if the divorce factor, comfort factor, or spousal acceptance factor is aided by having a tower or floor-mounted speaker in which there's a little appendage on the top that's firing up at the ceiling and reflecting back down, rather than putting holes in the ceiling, there is an option of doing that in the front. There's also an option of doing that in the back speakers, where you can have speakers from the back that are reflecting. So I'm showing a diagram of what I call the Atmos 9.1.2 reflected. And this is, I guess, the layout diagram, which is all the speakers are in the same place as what we had talked about before in the regular 9.1.2, except that there are no longer ceiling speakers. Instead, there are some floor-mounted, upward-directed reflected speakers.
What Dolby sometimes calls Atmos-enabled speakers, or you can place modules, up-firing modules on top of your existing speakers and get the same effect.
Correct. So there's two reasons for me showing this. One is to say there is a way to, there's two ways to skin this cat. One way is to drill holes in your ceiling and put speakers in there. Another way is to put some speakers on, Dolby enabled or Dolby Atmos speakers, either by replacing your speakers or adding these appendages, if that's what works best for you. I have noticed that some people think that the only way to play Atmos is by up-firing the sound into the ceiling, and that's not so. This is one option, right? Remember that
it depends upon having a ceiling that is reflective.
Correct.
And flat.
And flat. So this works if you have a ceiling somewhere around 8 to 10 feet and it's flat. It's not it's not a cathedral ceiling, it's not a slanted ceiling, it's not a coffered ceiling, it's actually a flat ceiling. So 2 points is there are options for making this happen without adding any speakers and wires anywhere, for one. For two, this is I guess I will use the word compromise, but only in the sense that the original performance that the sound designer is hearing is from speakers, an array of speakers on the ceiling, not sounds that are bouncing up and coming back. If you want to replicate that, you probably want to try to convince the other person who shares the house with you to let you put some speakers up there.
Right. Well, in the few minutes we have left, do you have any pictures of some of the rooms you've done and worked on that have this capability?
I thought you'd never ask. So let me actually go to that. Give me a second. I will open that. Here we have this. You're following me through this. And let me show you some room plans, because actually that's a little bit more useful and quicker. So
Sure.
This is a project we did for a client in Park City, or Salt Lake City. This is what the room looks like on plan. And by the way, this is issued from the company called PMI, Performance Media Industries. That's the engineering division that designs theaters. It's a 3-row dedicated theater in which there are 2 seating rows and then 1 tall, comfortable bar stool row at the back. And this is a view of where the speakers are located. So this is the back of the room. That's the front of the room. There are 3 front speakers mounted in curved baffles. There is a wide right speaker over here. There's 2 side speakers, and there are back speakers over here, side speakers, and then a wide left speaker. I'm going to switch diagrams over here so we can see it better. And this is where you can sort of see under the hood. So what's interesting in this room is that this was actually a retrofit. The room was originally designed for 7.1 and was later amended for Atmos. And in the regular 7.1 design, the speakers were bipolar speakers on the side wall. In the amended version, we added smaller, but also bipolar speakers at that wide position to complement that area that would otherwise be a black hole here. The speakers all get hidden behind a stretch fabric dress, which I'll bypass over here. And this shows an interesting peel-out view of the whole room with a reflected ceiling plan here. And then the right wall, the left wall, the right wall, the front and back. So let me actually go to the individual, let me go back.
And you're using up-firing speakers here, reflective?
No, these are all direct, actual located
direct
speakers. So
got it. Okay.
This is the actual diagram of our left wall in this room. Yeah, you can zoom in. That'd be great. So these are the side speakers, the original side speakers. There was an array of 3 speakers, and we amended that with a wide speaker over here. Now this little guy can't play as loud in the bass as these other guys, so we limited it at about 120 hertz. Just told the signal processor, this guy below 120 hertz is going to play into the subwoofers, and that's fine. By the way, subwoofers in this room, there are 8 of these JL Audio in-wall or surface-mounted subwoofer. They work great, placed in the corners. This is the right wall, where you see the original side speakers and the added wide speaker. This is the front wall where you see the fronts and some subwoofers. This is the back wall where you see the back speakers. These are, again, bipoles, not dipoles, but bipole speakers. And now here is the ceiling array. So this array actually is 3 pairs. There's a pair of speakers. I'm sorry, this is the screen over here. So there's a pair of speakers over here at a kind of a midpoint between the screen and the side speakers. There's a pair of speakers directly overhead and a pair of speakers behind the listener area. Okay, so this is, what is this called? This would be, I'm sort of losing count, but it would start off as a 9.4.6, if you want to call it that way. Okay, let me show you a different design for a different environment.
And while you're looking at that, I will say, everybody in the chat room, thank you so much for all your great questions. Weren't able to get to all of them today, but I do appreciate it very much.
All right, this is a different room, a little smaller, in which we have, here we're looking at the room from the top. This is the left speaker, center speaker, right speaker. There's an acoustically transparent screen. The center speaker is placed behind that screen. And over here we have our traditional side left, side right, and back loudspeakers. And we've added wide speakers over here and ceiling speakers over here. Now this is a particularly interesting approach at doing it. So here again we're actually using an array of all bipoles in order to cover the audience area correctly. This is the middle of the center of the front speakers. Notice how these things are all in a line going up here. So
got it.
This is wide and these are two side speakers.
Now, one question that came up in the chat room was using bipoles or diffusive, I guess, surround speakers, either bipoles or dipoles, in an Atmos system. And obviously you think that that's okay because you've been using them.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It depends on the room. This is a relatively small room. I wouldn't do it in a much bigger room, but in a relatively small room, for that loudspeaker to cover evenly. The main idea here was to actually try to cover, you don't see it here, but there's a seating position on bean bags over here too. But to cover these people and those people and those people, you need to have a really wide dispersion speaker so everybody gets the same sound. And in this application, which is not a very big room, that works. In a bigger room, we wouldn't do that. So let me fast forward to something fun. What the hell is this diagram?
What the hell is that diagram?
What the hell is this? So this room actually has a plaster ceiling that's made out of a material that's an acoustically transparent plaster that gets troweled over 1.5 inches or 2 inches of sound absorption. When you walk in this room, the ceiling looks like it's just a plaster ceiling. You don't actually realize it's an absorptive ceiling. Into that absorptive ceiling. So this technology, by the way, of acoustical plaster, as it's normally known, is supplied by one of 4 different vendors today in the U.S. There's 4 different companies installing these things. They use them a lot in large venues like in museums and places where lots of people gather in large spaces so that they're not too reverberant and echoey and noisy. But we've applied it over here as a way to control the vertical reflections in the room. And we've molded into that ceiling these 4 flush mount speakers. In this case, these are Sonance hidden speakers that are essentially feathered into the plaster and are blasting through the plaster. They are getting equalized to get around whatever the mass loading of the plaster is, and they are getting cut off at about 150 hertz because they don't play very good bass, but it sounds great. So that's another approach at doing something that completely survives any spousal acceptance issues, and is all good. So one last diagram. Do I still have 2-3 minutes here?
Just a couple minutes, but then we really do have to get ready for the next show.
Gotta get going. So this is another smallish room in Orange County, California. 2 rows. This is a ceiling plan of the room. 3 front speakers, left, center, right, mounted in baffles behind the screen. Our traditional side speakers, traditional back speakers, and then the amendment of ceiling mounted speakers and wide speakers. So we took a different approach on this one. The wides are actually regular loudspeakers that are going to get hidden behind stretch fabric, but in a little bump out, and they are aimed in. So you see how they're canted in so that they spray into the audience area correctly.
Yep.
So you see here a sidewall view of it. These are actually bipole speakers that create a nice array sense in this small room, and this is a direct firing speaker that's pointed into the audience area. This is a view of the front wall that shows our 3 front speakers behind an acoustically transparent screen, just like they do it in the regular movie theaters. And you can see the wide speakers over here. And this is the full acoustical treatment layout. So left wall has a complement of absorbers and diffusers, just like we've always done in 5.1 and 7.1 channel environments. We've made some room here for the wide speaker. The front wall has baffle-mounted speakers. The right wall, again, complement of absorbers and diffusers all spread out in a strategic way. Here's the wide speaker. And finally, we get to the ceiling, where these are the 4 ceiling speakers. These 2 are slightly in front of the front row. These 2 are slightly in front of the back row. They are wide dispersion speakers. We're using some bipole speakers from Triad over here so that they spray down into the room evenly and there's a wide sweet spot. Interestingly enough, we're also ceiling mounting 4 subwoofers in the 4 corners, or as much of a corner as you can have over here. And that gives a nice bass distribution in the room. So that's how we're going about these things. It's working well relative to what I've heard in mixed rooms for Dolby Atmos and movie theaters playing Dolby Atmos, the translation is pretty good, pretty close. You know, things are moving where they're supposed to go. It's enveloping. It's fun, and it adds that amazing third dimension that's been missing, which is all the stuff that goes overhead. Very exciting. Very exciting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's so much more to talk about, and we've run out of time. I want to thank you very much for being here, and certainly invite you back to talk more about this, and also about something we didn't get a chance to talk about today, which is your new Grimani Systems initiative, and in particular, how you managed to make a room such that two-channel audio and multi-channel movie, two-channel music and multi-channel movie all work very well. Many people think that can't be done, but you're here to say that it can, and I will look forward to hearing why next time you are able to come by. Thank you so much, Anthony Grimani.
Thank you so much, Scott. If you guys want to look at it, it's grimanisystems.com, new audio package that's kind of the result of about 20 years of experimenting with how do I fulfill my love for music, played in two-channel or multi-channel, with my love for movies played in multi-channel, all out of one system. And I think we're getting there.
Oh, can't wait! Can't wait! I'm going to definitely check it out. Of course, you can also go to Anthony's site, msracoustics.com, and also to grimanisystems.com, and follow him on Twitter at msracoustics. So plenty of ways to keep track of Tony there. You can find me, of course, at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv. And you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott, also at avsforum. You can always find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here on twit.tv/htg, and also on YouTube at youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, we're off for Thanksgiving, so I hope everybody has a safe and wonderful holiday. 2 weeks from now, my guest geek is scheduled to be anyway, and I expect he will be here, Greg Lowen, who is a master video calibrator, to let us know what's up with video calibration. I'm going to be asking him about quantum dots and lasers and OLED and how the heck do we calibrate those. So it should be a great conversation, and I do hope you will join us. Until then, geek out.